I would like to introduce our three panelists. Our first panelist is Neil Mason, who is General Manager at Ohana, Waikiki out East, and he is working with Outrigger Resorts and Hotels, and he is a long-standing member of the tourism industry. He's worked in Australia, he has worked in Hawaii, and he is going to share with us his experience. Our second panelist is Dean Okimoto. If you've been to one of our upscale restaurants, enjoyed the very nice greens that are provided by Nalo Farms, then you know that you've been appreciating Dean's efforts in the agricultural industry. Thank you very much. And our third panelist is Peter Glick. Peter has a very, let's say, a diverse career using his language skills, and he will share those comments with you. Peter is the president of a consulting and search firm, and I actually met Peter recently in a downtown forum and really enjoyed having a conversation with him, and I think you will also enjoy his remarks today. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a very quick introduction to myself. I joined Outrigger 10 years ago in Australia. Still not? That's better. I joined Outrigger 10 years ago in Australia and was with them through their first change in management or first sale of their asset away for 2 years, and then they invited me back to rebuild in Australia. I was with them in their opening property there for 2 years and then into their Noosa property for 4. So a good long relationship with them. Last year, in fact almost a year ago, they invited me to Hawaii, and I now sit in their corporate office and I'm looking after the Ohana hotels, the 2 of them that we've got at the minute. So an honor for me to be here today. I am speaking globally on how tourism, or how my industry deals with second languages, more so than specifically to Hawaii, but open to questions. So for our hotels, we have 28, and they're based in Hawaii, Thailand, Mauritius, the Maldives, Fiji, and Guam. You can already understand why I'm sitting here talking to you. So for me, I'm going to open with 3 things, namely the requirement, qualifications, and culture in dealing with languages. For requirement, we have an internal and an external. Internal, many of our hosts, English is a second language, and we have an obligation to be able to communicate with them and for them to be able to communicate with us. And we also have an obligation with cultural services, making sure that we respect and engage. External, we're a hotel company. We have property dependent. We have some that are very Japanese focused, with Japanese wholesale coming in and has been very strong in Hawaii for many years. And we look to engage Japanese speaking staff. Others have various market segments and not so much. And the bigger issue that we've got there is that when we do hire one that speaks Japanese, one that speaks Chinese, one that may speak any other number of languages, Murphy's Law is that when you've got a guest standing in front of you that wants that language, that person was not rostered on. Qualifications. Informally, we need to get by. It's difficult. We don't have, I mean, this concept of qualifications, of having a seal that we could recognize, doesn't exist yet. And it will be fantastic when we can acknowledge it as we do other qualifications. Again, formally, we've got properties that do have specific requirements, and when we're dealing, again, I'll use the example for Japanese, but we've got one of the Hilton properties that we manage is very highly Japanese. We require the qualifications. What those are is that they say that they can speak Japanese. We can't qualify it. We don't know how. And the other thing on qualifications that I just want to present, because I haven't seen it here, I wrote it down while I was sitting here listening to the other ones, the other two presentations, is our growing reliance on digital. We're dealing with technology to get by. We can download apps that do translations, so that when we don't have that staff member there, we can talk into a mobile phone and it will deal with the translation to the guest. It's not a person, but it does allow us to get by, and it's something that we need to recognize is being used in our industry, because we have not got the capacity of having a staff that can deal with that. And obviously, when you're dealing with qualifications, we're also dealing with websites. There are some companies, some of our industry colleagues do very well at having websites based in different languages. We're getting better at it, and we have it out there. The problem is, and a really good example, we send emails to all our guests that stay, asking them how their stay was, and we ask them to fill out a 20-minute, I don't know if it's 20-minute, 15-minute survey. It's wonderful. I take the time to respond to everyone that responds to me. There's only one problem. The ones that come back in a foreign language, I can't read. So it's very, very difficult to respond. And the last is culture. As we saw with the opening ole here, the value with the proliferation of local culture is immense. It's why most people come to Hawaii. And if we can, the sense of place, if we can engage in the property with the Hawaiian culture, it's invaluable. And whilst there's an opportunity, what I've been talking to so far with being able to engage with guests that are coming in from another country, when they can see the Hawaiian values and they can, they can be entertained or engage on this level, it takes a holiday experience to a completely different level. And some that come to mind are, in Fiji, for example, it's very much part of the experience of being in that country. Also with pride, and you'll see it with staff, having a state where you have two official languages. For me, coming in here, it's unbelievable. It's exceptional, and I'm quite amazed about how that has, well, it looks like it's strengthening. You're getting a larger and larger percentage of kids that are growing up that speak, internalize, and are quite proud of the Hawaiian language. And certainly when it's in your hotel and you see it in your hotel, it's quite humbling. And the last thing I'll say on culture is respect for guests. The one thing that teaching in a second language does is it goes past just the words and the writing. It also teaches respect for different culture. And one of the things that, going back to what I said about using a computer, doesn't do, it may be able to get you by with the translation immediately, but what it does not do is help you understand the culture of the person that you're talking to. And in our business as host, it's one of those things that can get highly embarrassing and that can cause a financial impact. We're unashamedly a commercial business. And I think we need to get better at understanding the culture of where these languages come from and being able to engage at those levels. And for us, being able to have access to staff that we can hire that are recognized for this seal, for this level of competency, would be fabulous. So I congratulate you on what's being done so far, and hopefully institutions like ours can be part of the process of taking that to the next level. Thank you.
Hi. I don't know what I'm doing here with these two distinguished guys here, but just to give you a little bit more background on me, it's interesting that, in my bio they put that I graduated from Iolani first, right? This is Hawaii, so it's like where you graduated high school, which is kind of funny. But over and beyond everything that's on here, I was president of the Hawaii Farm Bureau Federation for 10 years. Unpaid job, voluntary, which used to take up more time than my farm, actually, when I was doing it. But I did learn a lot. about the culture of agriculture in Hawaii, about the culture of agriculture nationwide, about what makes up agriculture in Hawaii. And if you read from, for example, that article yesterday about HCNS and their workers, which is such a sickeningly sad situation that's gone on over there. And it's disappointing that people in today's world do not understand agriculture. And a lot of it, you know, being president of Farm Bureau, I came across that we had 2,000 members, okay? There are 15,000 farmers in Hawaii, the majority of which are immigrant farmers. It is Thai, Laotian, Cambodian, Filipino, some Mexican now. And the problem with it is they don't trust people that don't speak their language. So to get them to understand the differences of what's going on in agriculture today in Hawaii is absolutely difficult, let alone business acumen. They don't have that ability. And I've actually told the university several times that I really believe that in their, and the state, in their College of Tropical Agriculture with Extension Service, that they do need bilingual people in there, because we're getting to be, when I first started farming, which was 32 years ago, okay, there was no such thing as, there was pesticide regulation, but not to the point where it is today, where you gotta log everything. You have to be able to read the label. You have to be able to explain to everybody what you're exactly doing to follow the law. They don't have that. So how are they gonna do their farming the correct way, a way that you're gonna trust the food that you eat from them, okay? Over and beyond that, we have food safety regulations coming into play. And it really is above the heads of most people in understanding how technical this is, how overbearing it is for most farmers. And you're gonna see, you know, as much as people in Hawaii talk about sustainability, about growing more agriculture, about supporting small agriculture, it's not gonna happen. Agriculture will have to get bigger to survive. That is just the dynamics of this industry. And when you see places like HCNS going under, you see Hamakua Springs on the Big Island going under, it's even more sad. That's telling you these are guys that have been successful for years, and they're quitting because they can't handle the costs that are involved with it. So how do you expect people that don't speak the language, even more so, to survive in this world going forward? And especially when they come from foreign countries and this is what they know. You know, we need to get them the education and be able to get people that can teach these people the business acumen, the market acumen, understand the culture, and incorporate them into the Hawaii community in order for us to grow this industry. And this is not only in Hawaii. You know, as much as you might not like the Monsantos, the Dows, and the Pioneers, and the seed corn companies, that is agriculture going forward. It's gonna get bigger. You're gonna have to depend on these guys. The one thing is, to be employed in this industry, you have to have degrees. Science, biology, all of these things. And some of the smartest people are really these farmers that are on their farm, surviving day to day, but they're good at what they do. They have the knowledge. It's just they don't have a way of interpreting it into communicating it to other people. And if they had those abilities, they might be those scientists that are doing all of these things going forward. And Hawaii is in a unique situation right now. It's the only way small agriculture is going to survive in Hawaii is if we keep the big agriculture here too. Because HCNS goes under, you're going to see tons of businesses going under on Maui. And these are businesses like that supply fertilizer, that supply all the inputs, because there's not a capacity to do it anymore. So agriculture, the prices are going to go up, all of these things. So, you know, whatever you may think that is wrong with GMOs and whatever, it is a fact of our world economy, that this is where we have to move towards in order to grow enough food for the world. And the only way we're going to do it is by having people that in whatever language they're able to communicate in, to understand these things, and to be able to pass it on, and to be able to teach and learn from. And that's why I think this program is absolutely essential for, of all places, Hawaii. I don't get that we weren't the first ones to do it, truthfully. As multicultural as Hawaii is, you know, it's like, okay, we should be one of the places leading in this whole initiative. And so I'm really glad that it's starting. I'm glad that legislators are starting to understand that this is crucial to the future growth of Hawaii, for the future business, everything. I mean, you know, I have a lot of friends in the hotel industry too, and they're going after Chinese business, and they can't find people that speak Chinese. You know, it's pretty amazing, or Korean, or you know, everything else. So, you know, of all places, Hawaii needs to really grow and the second languages, and be multilingual, really. Like Peter here, I mean, he's amazing how many languages he speaks. But yeah, going forward, it's not only for the good of Hawaii. I think it's a global thing for our people, for our kids to grow up going forward and finding jobs even in a global market. I think you need to, almost absolutely essential, to be bilingual. Thank you.
First of all, I'm going to ask you, in case there are any questions for me, please speak up, because I left about 40% of my hearing at a couple of choice spots in Vietnam during the war there, so I apologize in advance for that. I spent a lot of time preparing my remarks and so on. Before I kind of go into what I prepared, since this is an event built around language, I have a word for you. The word is vociferous. Vociferous. Anybody ever heard it? Raise your hand, please. Me neither. Until last week in the Wall Street Journal. See, I'm a cool guy, I read the journal, right? So, it means, you know, creating a fissure, separating things. But the point is, I read it in the newspaper, and I'd like you to remember that, because what I'm going to say, that will have some relevance. Anyway, I note that several of our speakers are professors, so I should confess that I myself have committed pedagogy, albeit a long time ago. I taught at the State University of New York, at Hofstra University, and at Columbia University. The experience convinced me that I had been irrevocably deformed by my years in combat, and I was ill-suited to a life in the academy. Okay. Yet the earth is round, and here I am again. I'm sure you'll be happy to know that this will be a brief appearance. But there is a point in this. Language proficiency has a place other than in the academic environment. It has a place also outside the cocktail party circuit, where your 15-word vocabulary in Swahili or some other language can be used to dazzle an impressionable other, perhaps an attractive young person of the opposite sex. I had a roommate when I was in graduate school who was tall and grew a blonde beard. He wound up looking like a Scandinavian sea captain. I gotta tell you, he was a Jewish guy from a suburb of New York, but never mind. When we went out on weekends, we used to introduce him to people as Lars. It was quite a conversation starter. when asked to say something in Swedish, he would immediately conjugate the verb to have. That's all he knew. He knew nothing else, but he could do that. It was a lot of fun, and we met some interesting people, but actually there are other benefits. Surely the most obvious and compelling reason for learning a second language is communication. There's also the issue of being able to access written material in a foreign language. Scholarly journals will come to mind for some of us, but perhaps the more vital resource is the daily newspaper. In some languages, the press is easily accessible, but in others, it operates in an idiom all its own. Chinese might be a fair example of this, somewhat Vietnamese. If you are going to understand a society, reading its newspapers each day provides an extraordinary view into the national and local ethos. I'm getting to the point. People can tell you what the news is, but they can't convey to you in translation the way the news is reported in the native language. And indeed, the way it is reported, the way it is expressed, is telling. You will miss a chance to develop a refined understanding of your host culture if you can't read its news, or any news, as that language reports it. Let me go a bit further with this. I have a close friend from Vietnam days who finished his career as one of New Zealand's highest-ranking diplomats. He was schooled in England and served in numerous countries. We got together recently after many years. There was much talk of U.S. politics and world affairs, especially the Middle East. He was getting his news mainly from the New Zealand press. It was clear that certain crucial background and nuances were not reaching him. The problem was not language, but the viewpoint of the journalists writing the news and how they understood the news. On the personal side, I recall when I started to try to read the Vietnamese newspapers. My spoken Vietnamese was reasonably good. The newspaper language was almost hermetic. When I finally broke through, I found myself with a different view of the news of Vietnamese events than I had had previously, and also a different view of the Vietnamese. I can only think that language was the key. Two things stand out in my mind as early impressions from reading the Vietnamese newspapers. One was the fact that almost every one, and I think there were 28 dailies at that point, almost every one contained a brief column that reported humorously on events with, let's call them, intimate overtones. I hadn't experienced this facet of the Vietnamese in my daily interactions and conversations. Being aware of it gave me access to and understanding of comments and double entendre that I had happened on in conversation. It also made me aware that when such comments were made, it indicated more than a casual level of friendship or comfort in the other's presence. The second thing was the profound degree of anti-American and anti-foreign sentiment at large in Vietnam in those days. I was not ignorant of what was spoken of as Vietnamese xenophobia, but reading frankly apocalyptic press accounts of American evil impressed me with how circumspect I had to be in dealing with and speaking about the myriad of things that could raise such concerns. We tell ourselves our own tales, but we know comparatively little of the tales others tell themselves or how they tell them. Local newspapers and broadcasts give us an insight into these that is essentially not available elsewhere and is irreplaceable. This brings me to what I consider essentially the most important thing that needs to be said about language learning. Namely, that if it is to mean anything, especially in a business context, it has to be a true tool for communication and understanding. It cannot be approached casually or in a hit or miss fashion. Of course, some knowledge is better than none, but we are business people engaged in a serious enterprise, not older ladies in sensible shoes asking directions to the ladies' room. If we really want to benefit from our knowledge of a second language, we must not only learn it, we must possess it. This is the point at which we stop composing sentences before we speak them and stop translating from our native language to a second language. This is the point at which we think automatically in the second language, the point at which it becomes impossible for us to say something that sounds like English translated but is spoken in a second language. If we possess the language, our utterances come out naturally as a native speaker would present them. And this gets me to the heart of the matter. Yeah, I know, finally I got to the heart of the matter, right? When one learns a language, well, one is learning more than words or even grammar. One is learning how native speakers think. That brings about an alchemy, a transformation in the speaker who, all at once, is adopting physical postures, gestures, and facial expressions essentially identical to those of the native of the country in question. This phenomenon finds it almost impossible to take place without the accompanying shift in cultural viewpoint, from that of one's birth to that of the host country. And remember that both Niel and Dean spoke about this cultural issue. I'm afraid it may be difficult to understand fully what I'm saying, so I'll ramble a bit more on this. If any of you possesses French, for example, you may have been told by someone that when you speak French, you look like a Frenchman. I've been told this, but I also recall my ex-wife, who was a Vietnamese lady, telling me that when I spoke Vietnamese, she sometimes hated me because I looked like a Chinese. My first Asian language was Cantonese. A considerable while later, she told me that I had finally learned Vietnamese because not only could I speak it, but I looked like a Vietnamese when I spoke. Yeah, I know, with this nose, small chance of looking like a Vietnamese, but anyway. But of course, she was referring to expressions, gestures, and postures. So in its way, the possession of a second language is the Khyber Pass, the way into the heart of what would otherwise be an inaccessible kingdom. I experienced this in compelling terms at a dinner in Vietnam. The guest of honor was David Kennedy, then U.S. Secretary of the Treasury. The host was the Vietnamese Minister of Economy. Guests included U.S. diplomats from the economic side of the embassy and Vietnamese business people and government economic executives. After dinner, the guests broke into groups. The Vietnamese hung together as one group, the Americans as another. I was with the Vietnamese because they were my friends, and I had known them a lot longer than I had known any of the Americans. The conversation was friendly, humorous, and of course in Vietnamese. At one point, a gentleman told a joke, the punchline of which was a knock on the Americans. We all laughed, but suddenly he caught himself looking towards me in embarrassment. Everyone saw what was happening. The governor of the National Bank broke the mood by saying to the man who told the joke, "Don't worry about him, he's Vietnamese." The point, once you have such possession of a second language, the most wonderful thing happens. The lines blur, the barriers become non-existent, and you get to see and understand what your hosts, well, they're no longer hosts, they're friends and peers, really think. This is not an unimportant advantage for the business person.
I'm sure that the presentations from each of these gentlemen have given you considerable pause for thought in thinking about preparing your students, in thinking about what it means to bring your language skills into the workforce, and also, of course, if you are a parent, what it means to make sure that your child continues their studies. Questions and comments, please. It wouldn't be a business panel without a business person asking.
Thank you, panelists. My name is Alice Lee Hagan from the Shiloh College of Business. Actually, my question has, perhaps I'll ask Mr. Mason to address it. You came from Australia, so I'm interested in learning about your experience in Australia, especially in terms of what it was like in the tourism business, how they foster multi-language, multilingual staff, how do they cultivate that, and comparing it to the tourism industry here in Hawaii.
Australia is a lot further behind than what you are already. Almost to the point that within employee handbooks there is a requirement that you converse within the workplace in English. It's not encouraged that there is a multicultural, multilingual interaction. That's not to say that within Australia it isn't multicultural. I learned a lot of lessons within Australia, and in the environment, it works well. Within the business, though, and certainly within tourism, I would suggest talking to the point here is that it is mechanical. The conversations that happen on a desk are manufactured. They do not understand the person that you're dealing with. Within Hawaii, a lot more happens. Certainly, spending time with my housekeepers, for instance, we have a large Filipino and a large Chinese base. They will very much interact, and then they are appreciative that you're not being included. So they will look to help each other in being able to communicate with me. That didn't happen in Australia.
Thank you very much for your thoughtful presentation. My name is Tarina Wong. I'm with a nonprofit community-based organization that empowers immigrants, refugees, and low income. And I also am a member of the Office of Language Access. So we very much believe in providing language access to our limited English proficient community. But I also believe that language access is very important also to our guests who come to Hawaii. So specifically, I'm wondering, there is a big focus on language, but to what extent do your organizations think about the importance of cultural values and understanding culture, cultural norms, and patterns of thinking that are so much a part of language learning and developing multiple perspectives?
I'll start, and then I'll pass it on. Hawaii is quite an amazing environment to walk into when you look at an acceptance of culture. You may get a lot of different language bases, so whether it's Chinese, Korean, Filipino, they come in, but what they're all doing is accepting of an environment that is culturally accepting of Hawaiian as the second base language. Especially within our company, the culture base and the way that we are inducted into the company, even when I was in Australia and the way we were inducted into the company, again, commenced with an ole and a lot of understanding of what the cultural values of Hawaii was. We didn't try and be Hawaiian in Australia, and we're not expecting non-Hawaiian hosts, staff, to be Hawaiian, but they very much respect the culture. So, whilst it's positive here, when you're talking about guests coming, what they do is they see that there's a value in the Hawaiian base, but the lack of language And it varies in degree because we have different hotels with different levels of bilingual, multilingual capacity. But certainly in the ones that do not have, they're primarily English, is that whilst they may understand that there is a requirement to respect the culture of the person they're talking to, without the language, it provides a big barrier. And I think that's what what is being commenced here is if we can get educators from young kids to understand that there is so much more value in being able to have 2 or more languages, it will do exactly this, is it will provide them an understanding of who that person is, an understanding of how they communicate, an understanding of their background and their cultures. And I think that can only be immensely valuable when you're in an employer, when you're in a business environment, and whether it's just checking them in and out, or whether you're buying a hotel from them. You're dealing with these massive scales that culture is everything, and language is absolutely the vehicle to do that. I hope I've answered your questions.
Yeah, I think the first couple years I was president of Farm Bureau. After the second year, I was invited to a dinner, and it was put on by Thai and Laotian and Cambodian immigrants, farmers, and it's almost like, how I really believe food really brings cultures together. I mean, absolutely, it is the one thing that everybody can get around. And by the way, the food was absolutely unbelievable. But most of it was vegetables. I mean, right? I mean, things that these farmers were raising and things like that. And it was the first time I had been to something that it must have been about 200 people, and there were maybe 10 of us that were local. The rest were all immigrant farmers, and I had a great time. They came up, asked questions about, okay, how to get information on certain things, and although we had to use an interpreter, because we enjoyed the food, and I had the experience too with Filipino food, for example, at the beginning, right, of dinaguang and stuff like that, right? Okay, it's not one of my favorite foods, but I wouldn't say that. And by the way, Filipino food is my favorite food, otherwise. But, it's even, you'll see, you see it now. Guys like Alan Wong, Roy Yamaguchi, they're hiring Filipino, Laotian chefs that is morphing their food. I mean, Roy right now has an eating house concept on Kauai that's, I don't know how you get this, but it's Portuguese Filipino. He's going to bring it to Honolulu. Alan Wong is putting on a dinner. He does it once a month, and it's multicultural. He's opening in Shanghai, and he has a Filipino chef there too that does some integrating of foods. So you're seeing it happen here already with food, and I think that's part of where we need to start with in being able to culturally understand the different areas. And once you can see that, it's a lot more engaging, easier to understand the culture, and two, having them accept you into their culture is by sharing food and things like that. So, I don't know if I'm answering the question really, but I think this is going to happen. Hopefully, I think it's going to start happening in the tourism world here, for sure, because these tourists still want to go to Alan Wong's and Roy's and all these other places, right, when they come. But even the hotels, you're going to start seeing the food morphing into those directions. Kai Market is a good example at the Sheraton with Darren Amaya, Andaya. So, yeah, I think, and who doesn't like food?
I just might add a small comment as somebody who has been attracted to Asian languages predominantly because of the script. It turns out that a lot of people who are not native learners of Asian languages, the first thing that attracted them was the menu at the restaurant. They couldn't read the menu and they wanted to know what it said. So, thank you.
Mr. Mason, for those who are not native speakers, what is the level of proficiency that you think is required to work at a hotel?
Brilliant question. I don't know whether I'm qualified to answer. You're dealing... Well, yes, depending on where you're at and what department you're in. If you're dealing specifically with an international guest arriving at your reception desk, it can be very, very basic language. Can you check me in? Can you check me out? Can you tell me where the bathroom is? And that would be acceptable. Obviously, the more international commercial interaction that you're taking on, it needs to be at a much, much higher level. Again, if you're dealing with international relationships, trying to have, for instance, one property management system operating, you need to be able to communicate within different languages. So you're dealing with a translation requirement from one to the other, through to business meetings in the places of business, places that you would like to do business, and that may be at very high levels of government and trade. So, depending on where you're at within our industry, there's vast different levels. The biggest thing about this environment is that it's a start of an acceptance of how important this is, and it hasn't existed. And I think, as was said in the earlier presentations of how quickly it's happening, it's being accommodated. One of the things that was interesting that we spoke of very briefly just before we sat down was that the last point on the presentation was that there was no engagement yet from the academics to the business world. This is a nice start, but I would suggest that needs to happen extraordinarily quickly, because there's an opportunity there for us to engage. And I would suggest we could probably be doing a lot of legwork for you, whether it's financing, whether it's lobbying, whether it's getting kids into the work environment to practice their language skills. I don't know, but we've got a huge capacity to engage with the academic world.
We have a comment from our Chinese flagship director, Madeline Spring.
I just want to applaud this panel. I think it's really important. Just like as you just said in your final comment, the connection between academics and the workforce is really, we need to improve that tremendously. So I just want to draw everybody's attention. You may not be aware of, the packet that you have has a flyer there about a flagship program that we have that is going on right now, where we are training kids to reach these very high levels of language acquisition in Chinese and Korean right here. So the question I have is kind of how can we kind of access this other world? We really need to decide how to set up some kind of forum or something where once we get these kids who have reached higher levels, and especially once they are at university stage, so they're older and more mature and able to, looking for jobs, how can we figure out a way to intersect with the business community? I'd love to meet your friends that are looking for kids who can speak Chinese. I'd send a bunch of them over.
You know, one thing is, I will tell you, I've had a conversation with the executive director of the Hotel, Lodging, and Hotel, Hotel, Lodging, and Tourism Association, who's Mufi Hanneman, by the way. He's a good friend of mine. And I tell you, that's who you should contact, because he can engage all the hotels all at once and get them on board this whole program. And I guarantee you he'll be interested in it, because I think he understands the connections with China, Korea, Japan, Australia, everywhere. So, and he's looking for these types of programs to help, truthfully.
Any,
This may not be terribly practical, but I remember years back, James and even the business school had, whether it was internship programs or programs in which students could go and work overseas for a period of time. And I think that one of the keys to what you are seeking would be to get these students into an environment where they are in effect immersed in the culture whose language they speak. They will come back changed in many ways, and they'll understand.
That is actually the part of the flagship program. That is the part of the flagship program that is maybe most impressive, is that the students go to China or Korea for a year, and they study for part of the time, and then they do internships in their particular area. So that is happening. That's what I'm saying is kind of, this is happening right now. It's a kind of a gem for the state of Hawaii, and we really need to get the word out in multiple ways. I'm not sure.
Hi, Mr. Mason, I have a question for you. My name is Kazuyoki Taguchi. I'm from Roosevelt High School. I'm specifically teaching business Japanese course, which tied with Hawaii's tourism industry. So this course, I'm teaching hotel the sentences and then how to deal with Japanese tourists. And which job position, are you specifically looking for Japanese speaking or, Chinese speaking, or whichever the language? For the position. Do you understand my question? Which area are you looking for? The front desk, bell desk?
The whole hotel, if you're dealing with a school of hospitality, there's opportunities in every department. The most obvious is on reception, because you're dealing with the interaction with an incoming Japanese guest. But certainly your bell desk can interact in housekeeping, if that's the field that they want to go into, is highly advantageous. They can interact with guests on the floors, they can interact internally within our own staff. So there's absolutely opportunity at all levels within the property with people that speak, and whether it's Japanese or any other language. I'll just throw it.
So in order to stay on time, but there will hopefully be some time after the closing remarks for you to interact. If not, please, as I said, write down your questions on the blue card. Let us know who you're directing them to. We will chase down the answers. And I would like to very much extend my appreciation to the three of you for presenting the perspective from business and encouraging us to keep our connections going and keep our work going. Thank you very much.